Crabbe's Journal 15. The first frost of the year surprised me. When I emerged from the tent one morning at dawn, it was my turn to start the fire and make the tea. The whole campsite was coated with what looked like frozen mist. As soon as the sun cleared the horizon, the frost quickly turned to moisture. But as the wood caught fire, I thought about the time of year, and it seemed that the days were a little shorter. The lake water was chilly, almost too cold for comfortable swimming, and we wore heavier clothing these days. Soon the trees traded in their many shades of green for the colors of autumn, bright yellow on the birches and poplars, flaming red and orange on the hardwoods, blood red on the sumacs. Later still, after the cold began to pinch the leaves from the branches, cold, bitter rains fell from leaden skies, and chevrons of geese and ducks were on the move. Some rafted up out to the main lake at night. One morning we were sitting in the tent, waiting out a miserable cold drizzle. That morning there had been ice on our bay shore. Crab, said Mary, after sitting in her thinking pose a while. I think it's time. Nah, I replied, misunderstanding her. Still raining to beat hell out there. No, I mean it's time we planned your re-entry into civilization. She hunched her shoulders, gathering her sleeping bag tighter around her. A sinking feeling went through me. I knew this was it. I had been expecting it. It had snowed several days before, melting when it hit the ground, and the snow must have triggered her thoughts too. I stuffed my hand in my pocket for my pipe, and I said, trying not to sound whiny and pleading like a child, I don't want to go, Mary. I cleared my throat, looked into those gray eyes, and called up the courage I could, all of the persuasiveness I could. Mary, I know you won't like this, but I have to say it. I love you. I want to stay with you. I don't want to go back. She began to speak, but I jumped from a sitting position to my knees, my sleeping bag falling away, and shook her shoulders in my hands and rushed on. I've got nothing to go back to, really. I'm telling the truth. You know that. I don't want to leave you here. You're where I want to be. And her gray eyes slowly filled with tears as she sat silently. The water magnified the gray for a moment, then the tears overflowed and ran down her cheeks. I knew this would happen, she said in a small voice that seemed to come from somewhere else. I knew I shouldn't have kept you here. I'm sorry, Crab. It's just that I was so lonely. Don't be sorry. Look, there's another way. Couldn't you come with me? No, she whispered. It's impossible. We were silent for a moment. The rain pattered sharply on the tent. Crab, she said finally, you have to go. You see that, don't you? Yeah, I see that. And thanks for what you said, she continued. I love you too. You're a fine man. It's strange. The way she said that, I knew she didn't mean romance love, the kind I felt for her. She meant friends love, and it was almost better. Romances seem to come and go nowadays, but good friends stay that way. So I was filled with fighting feelings, sadder than I'd ever been that I had to finally go, happier than I'd ever been that she loved me, the person I wanted most in the world to love me. So I didn't say anything. I moved my hands from her shoulders and hugged her. She held me tightly for a long time, and we both cried. It was a corny scene, I guess, if you weren't involved. 2 days later, we began what was to be our last trek together. We headed out on a chilly but sunny morning and had to break through a thin layer of ice on the surface of the bay until we got to the main lake. You never guessed where we were going. We were on a raid. That's right, a raid. Not kid stuff either. This was for real. Mary's plan, as usual, was sensible with a little touch of craziness thrown in. We were out of staples like salt, flour, and stuff like that, mainly because my presence in the household made the food go twice as quickly. I wondered one day where we'd get more, and that led to wondering where my companion had got the stuff we were using. I stole it, Mary said casually. What, you ripped off a Miracle Mart? I laughed. She laughed too. We hadn't been doing much of that lately. No, she continued, from a hunt camp. Just a minute. She took a quick trip into the bush and returned lugging the mystery packed, plunked it down on the fire. Pulling the leather straps free, she took out a map and spread it on the ground. She knelt down, and so did I. I guess I can show you where we are now since you're leaving, she said. The map showed in detail the whole area where we were situated. Mary pointed out our lake, the bay where our home site was, hidden away from the world. Thanks to my newly gained map reading ability, I was able to trace my route from Ithaca Camp. What an idiot I had been. Mary also pointed out why this was a good place to hide. There were no roads for miles and miles, not even logging tracks, and no canoe routes came through the area, mainly because of the dangerous nature of the rivers that entered and exited our lake. See this square dot? She indicated with her finger near the bottom, almost off the map. This is the hunt camp. It's about 400 yards from this medium sized lake that's part of a chain of lakes. They're just off the map down here. Last spring, I ran out of grub, so I had to go down there. They've got a huge storage area in the kitchen, and the place doesn't appear to be used in winter. I paid for the stuff, of course, left a note saying I was a trapper passing through and got caught short of supplies. Looks a long way off, I said. It's 2 days full travel and good weather. Now here's my plan. If we're lucky, nobody will be around. There might be, since this is duck season, but we'll have to hope. I'll grab my food, and once I'm on my way, you can follow the road out of the camp to the main road, and sooner or later you'll get a lift. It's the only sensible way I can think of to get you out. So there we were, headed out on a big caper at the end of which Mary and I would separate forever. We cached the canoe at the south end of the lake in the stand of balsam, and I shouldered the big pack. It was light, containing only dried food, bedrolls, rainwear, and another empty canoe pack for the food. Mary planned to fill both packs, hide one about a mile from the camp, and return for it. We made good time. The leaves being down, the bush was fairly open. We traveled over every kind of terrain you could imagine. A couple of hours from the lake, we began to run into a series of high, sharp ridges, like fingers splayed across the landscape. They were dark gray granite patched with small stands of sumach and scrub oak. It was tough country to travel because the fingers were swamps and the beaver dams and fingers themselves rose almost vertically in place. I felt like a mountain climber. Occasionally, we walked along the edge of cliffs 3 stories high. We spent the night on top of one of those ridges, tired as hell, under a clear sky dusted with stars. Next morning was cold and clear. A couple of hours got us into gentler landscape, rolling hills of hardwoods with a few creeks to cross. The only thing that slowed us down was the occasional patch of swampy ground that we had to skirt. There was still absolutely no sign of humans. I felt like a coeur de bois. Just about dusk, we began to approach the lake. The land began to descend, and we ran into softwoods, evergreens, and birch. Mary stopped just before we broke free of the trees. She pointed across the kidney shaped lake, and there on the far shore, on a small promontory of maybe 2 acres, was a group of long buildings huddled in the trees. Smoke was coming from one of the chimneys.